Hi, it's Sunday, and I'm doing an experiment today because Chaim Chernoff is here twisting my arm because he's a sponsor of today's podcast. And the experiment is that we're doing a video component as well, trying to get used to it. You know, I'm technically a Neanderthal, and Chaim is here with me. And I'm not only recording this, in other words, as I always do for a podcast, but it's also being, video cams being recorded to be put up online as a video. I don't know if it'll work or not, but I'm taking his word for it. And he's a lot smarter than I in these things. So, without any further ado, I'll just get down to the fact that today, of course, is Shabbat Tammuz. I just want to say a few words about Shabbat Tammuz. It'd be a little ridiculous on a fast day of historical importance to go talk about somebody else. And here's the point. Shabbat Tammuz, I think many people are aware, is a confusion of dates. Because in the book of Kings, I think, where with Jeremiah, it says that the destruction of the first temple was on the 9th of Tammuz. Okay? On the 9th. Now, it's not clear whether that's just a mistake, in which case it's very interesting. I'll get back to that in a minute. Or it's not a mistake. It's really happened on two separate dates. I think most of you are familiar with what I'm talking about. And if you hold the second way, then you simply say, yeah, the first temple was breached, the walls of the city, whatever, were breached on the 9th. The second time was on the 17th. You can't have two fasts. I mean, come on, give me a break. And so they just said, we'll go by Bayis Sheni. Heck with Bayis Rishon. That's one way of looking at it. Now, here's the point I wanted to get at. I assume everybody's familiar with Shabbat Tammuz. The Mishnah says there's 5 different things that happen. It's the city was breached not the first time, second time, that's 2. And then you have the carbon atomic was discontinued. They say in the first temple. I don't know. That would be during the siege of Jerusalem. Others would say it's the second temple, whatever. And then there's a Sarf Apostomus is a Torah. Some dude named Apostomus burned the Torah. Well, what's the big deal about that? There are a lot of Sefer Torahs, I'm sorry to say, and you know as well as I do, been burned in Jewish history. Just think about how many Sefer Torahs were burned by Hitler. That's just one, right? For some reason, Sarv Apostomus is a Torah. Some Greek guy, we don't know who Apostomus is. And Apostomus really means you drop the L, so it's some guy named Posthumos. It's a Greek name, right? So Posthumos, the Bartanor or somebody like that says they go from the time of the Yavanim. It's supposed to be associated with Hanukkah. That's very interesting. Most people, if you ask them what she was about Tammuz, they don't make the connection with Hanukkah. By Hanukkah, I mean with the Greek Shema, with the persecution of Judaism. The Greeks, as we all know, if this is true, captured the temple, and they didn't destroy it, but they raped it. And that's what Hanukkah is all about. The Maccabees eventually reconquered it, as we all know, and rededicated. Well, rededicate means they had to clean the place up. Look like an Italian funeral home full of idols and junk like that. And so this is discussed in the Megillus Titus in some detail, talked about in the past. And according to this, one of the things the Greeks did when they captured a temple was not simply to bring in Trave and kill the Jews and bring in idols and all the rest of it, but Sarva Pasmas the Torah. This guy Pasmas burned the Torah. Does it mean the Torah in a generic sense, all the Sefer Torahs you could find, or does it mean the master copy of the Torah? Perhaps we could talk about that. And then it says Hemitzon Behechol. And this guy named Postumus, so again, we don't know in history, there's no record of this guy except this Mishnah. He also set up an idol in the temple in the Kodesh Kodashim. Makes total sense if it was the Greek times, the Hellenistic era. It's just interesting because I guarantee you, 99% of people, you tell them what she was about Thomas, you think of the Romans. I get that. You think of the Romans. Okay, but and people are a little confused. Is it Tisha B'Av? It's the other thing. Whatever the case is. Here we see something connected with the Hanukkah time. There is another girsa famous in the Mishnah, and the Mishnah says, Sarv Apostomus is a Torah. That's one thing. V'homat sel mehechol. So using passive verb, not handmade sel mehechol. No, it's not that this guy Apostomus did 2 things. A, he burned down the Torah that he found, and number 2, he set up an idol. But rather you read it like this. There are 5 tragedies. One of them is called Postumus burned the Torah. Okay, that's A. And then something totally unconnected with that. A idol was set up in the Heichel in the base of Mikdash, in the Kodesh Kadoshim. When you use the passive voice, you don't know who did it, right? That's why they always make a joke. A passive voice is to be avoided at all times. In college, they always have that, because you don't know who did it. So, who would be the ones who would put up an idol in the base of Mikdash? It's very interesting that the Yerushalmi and the Mepharshim would say, "What's a Jew? No, it's a Jewish king. You had plenty of wicked Jewish kings of the south, not of the north. The north also had wicked kings. Every single king in the north was wicked. Every single one of them did the golden calf. I repeat, every single one of them in the north did the golden calf. Some of them went beyond the golden calf, like Achab, and they did the Baal and Asherah. But in the south, it's supposed to be Malchus based David. But some of these Davidic kings, even though they're descended from David and Melch, were nuts. And when I say nuts, they're pathological in their sinning. Let's put it this way. You would do an Avera, I get it. I want to do an Avera too sometimes. It's normal. But a person to do Lahachas, because you believe in God, you want to take them off, that's not normal. And that's what these kings did. And according to that, Menashe or Ochos, they say Menashe was super wicked, just as part of the idea of angering God, because he liked to take off God. So he put an idol in the Kodesh Kadoshim. So that would mean Jew did it to Jew. So it's not the Greeks did it to us or the Romans. We have plenty of junk from that also. But rather, instead, you have what we're mourning, we're fasting, because some stupid Jews did things to other stupid Jews, right? Some wicked Jews, rather, did bad ones. Now, there's a very famous passage. I'm sure I must have talked about in previous years, from the book of Zechariah in the Bible, it's the Old Testament now. And it says, now Zechariah lived at the beginning of the Second Temple. The problem was, which is very fascinating, and that is, they had Tisha B'Av, and the base of Mikdash was destroyed by the Babylonians. Okay, that's A. And now 70 years later, or whatever it was, they let them go back and rebuild the Second Temple, or at least to start it. So what is the status of Tisha B'Av now? Now that you have a Bayis Sheni, or you're going to, do you still keep Tisha B'Av? That's just interesting. Is Tisha B'Av commemoration of the past, or are you crying over the present? Correct? For example, nowadays, you and I, unfortunately, the situation doesn't matter. We're mourning when they destroyed the base of Mikdash, and we're also mourning the fact that we do not have a base of Mikdash. So the two are identical. The past tragedy extends to the present time. But what about if it didn't? Okay? It's a little bit like, I remember there were a few people that were drunk with victory after 1967, and they say you don't have to have Tisha B'Av anymore because we conquered the Arabs, and you don't have to have Menachem because we got the old city back and all the rest of it. Nowadays, I'm sorry to say, what is it, 1967? It's almost 60 years, whatever it is, right? 50-some years. Nobody today says, oh, we hold Jerusalem, and you don't have to say Menachem anymore. Everybody knows the Arabs are all over the place. And look at the recent fighting. The Israelis said boo, and they start shooting rockets from Hamas. So we're barely, I'm sorry to say, we're barely holding on. But there was a time of triumphalism. And during those few years, I remember there were, super Mizrahi types who say, oh, now you don't have to say this prayer and that prayer. So in a similar vein, not identical, but similar, you had the time of the prophet Zechariah, and it says, Vahidvar Hashem supposed to say lightly more. The prophet Zechariah says, I'm sorry, here it is, at the beginning of chapter 7. When Darius was a king, so this would be when they rebuilt the second temple. So Zechariah got a prophecy. A whole bunch of Jews with Goyish names, Sharetzer and Regem and so forth, came to visit the temple. These are Babylonian Jews living in Babel, and they're coming to offer karbonos and stuff like that. And you would say today, Shalos and Shuvas. They're coming with a shaila to bring to the base of Mikdash. Lemor al Kohanim Ashel Beis Hashem Ba'al Neviim. They wanted to ask the Kohanim and Neviim more in Jerusalem. Ha'ev ke b'yom b'chodesh Chamishi. It's mamash our holiday today, our fast day. Should I continue to cry b'chodesh Chamishi on Shabbos or Tammuz? What's the point? We're rebuilding Jerusalem. We're rebuilding the temple. What do you got to cry for the old stuff for? Or am I wrong? They asked it as a straightforward question. Okay? He knows there. Kasher osisi kamashanim. Should I continue to be Naziris? In other words, to refrain from this, that, and the other, as we've been doing in mourning over the destruction of Beis Hamikdash, but now we're rebuilding it. So what is the law? Okay? What is the law? And as is often the case, God gives the answer you don't expect. But Yidvar Hashem is supposed to say more. And God answers, Emra Kol Mortzal Konim, let me tell the following. Ki tzamtem b'sovet b'chamishi shvi shiv shana hatzamtem taniani. You've been fasting for 7 years. Do you think I like it? In other words, are you fasting for me? I got it. I don't fast. I don't eat and drink. You're the ones that fast, and you're the ones that eat and drink. This is the same prophecies that I give from long ago still apply. Then if you skip a whole bunch of psukim, right, it's a little confusing, but if you go to chapter 8, this is the part that the Gemara always quotes. Here it is, in chapter 8, verse 18. Vayidvar Hashem tzvos Eli lemor, Kol Mar Hashem tzvagos. Tzom Revi, Tzom Chamishi, Tzom Shvi, Tzom Atziri. All the classic fast days. In other words, not, what do you call it? Those Tisha B'Av, Shiva Asar Tammuz, Sar B'Tevis, and the Tzom Gedalia. Right? Again, Tzom Revi, Tzom Chamishi, Tzom Shvi, Tzom Atziri. So Tzom Revi would be our fast day. Tzom Chamishi would be Tisha B'Av. And Tzom Shvi would be Tzom Gedalia, and Tzom Atziri would be Sar B'Tevis. As they say in English, my father-in-law used to say, the fast days will become feast days. Okay? But then comes the oracle, right? Then comes the unclear part. What is that? Just PC stuff? You know what I mean? Like, what does it mean? You should love emes v'shalom. So the plain forward way that I understand it to mean is, provided you have unity. Okay? If you love truth and peace, which the Jews never do, so therefore it's one of those open-ended things. Let me put it to you this way: here in the year 2021, are you telling me that the Jewish people have emes v'shalom ha'avo? I'll put even more biting. In the frum world, is emes v'shalom ha'avo? All the groups get along with each other, baloney. So that's what it sounds like. If you'll get your act together and you'll bring achdus, then the fast days will become feast days. So how do you understand this? In Pasha B'Shat, right? Notice what I'm saying is like this. Do we have to fast nowadays? This is a question discussed in the Gemara. I don't want to go into the Talmudic stuff right now. I'm just not in the mood. It's in Rosh Hashanah. But I'll tell you the angle, which is something of a mystical angle. And that is the following. What do you mean the fast day become feast days? So the plain way of saying it is like this. If you do teshuvah, then in reward for doing teshuvah, you know, like a midah and a midah or something like that, or tit for tat, or poetic justice, however you want to phrase it, and the fast days will be feast days. You can't hear like that. But mystically speaking, I think it's more than that. I'll tell you where I'm going with this. Today is Shavuos B'Tammuz. What is the original Shavuos B'Tammuz? What's the first tragedy of the 5 in the Mishnah that on whose behalf they set up this fast day? I don't say they set up a fast day at that time, but when all 5 things happen at once on the same day, sooner or later somebody came up with the excuse me of the fast day. Although they did have it in the first temple before they had the second temple stuff. In other words, before Sarfa Posthumous is the Torah, which obviously was sometime the second temple period, and before they had Hufka Ir Shnia, the second with the Roman siege of Jerusalem, that obviously was the second temple. Already, I just read you from Book of Zechariah, there is a Tzom Revi and Tzom Chamishi. So there was a Shavuos B'Tammuz going at that time, right? Going at that time. Does that make sense? Right? Now, consider well the following. Today is supposed to be Shavuos. Do you understand that? I've said it many times. Hopefully you forgot it. Today is supposed to be Shavuos. What do I mean? Today's Zman Matan Torah Seinu. I repeat, Zman Matan Torah Seinu. What do you mean by that? The original time of Shavuos, back in Sivan, is not when the Torah was given. It's when the 10 Commandments were pronounced. I said 100 times, right? Am I right or am I wrong? The Torah was not given then. God pronounced the 10 Commandments. They didn't give the tablets yet. Okay? The most you could say, like a Sadigon type thing, is, well, you know, if you know how to decode it properly, all the Torah is located within the 10 Commandments. The 6 and 13 mitzvahs located within the 10 Commandments. Look, he's smarter than I am, but that's a job to do that. And certainly not transparent. Right? To make the argument, you can see all 613 mitzvahs somewhere in the text, 10 Commandments. That's a trick. Okay, pull that off. Rather, the Pashim Shah goes like this. When the Jews came to Mount Sinai, they happened to be in a good mood at the moment. Achdus, God, Chapterain, they said, I'm going to pronounce the Ten Commandments today. But then, as we all know, he said like this. Now, this day of pronouncing the Ten Commandments commences a period of 40 days. I want Moshe to go up to the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. At the end of that time, I'll give him the tablets, which he did. Correct? So, Matan Torah Senu, even in the, what's the right word, limited sense of the two tablets of the Ten Commandments, the Luchos, at least it was something physical, right? At least. It's not the whole Torah yet. At least it's something epis. Moshe came down from the mountain with the two physical tablets that God created out of nothing on 40 days after Shavuos. Well, that's Shavuos for Tammuz. Am I right or am I wrong? Moshe came down. It turned out, unfortunately, that's the day they made the golden calf. Moshe got angry and he broke the tablets. They broke the tablets. But if they hadn't done that, then today would be Tzma Matan Torah Senu. In other words, nothing happens by coincidence. The good Lord obviously chose Shivasa B'Tammuz to be literally Zman Matan Torah Senu. It's to be a happy day. It's a positive day. Correct? It's a positive day. Incidentally, and this is just intriguing, had they not screwed up, and as Matan Torah Senu, you wouldn't have Yom Kippur. Because what is Yom Kippur about? After they messed up, and he broke the tablets, and they didn't have anything, Moshe spent 80 days davening, 40 and then 40. The first 40 was to persuade God not to kill everybody, which he eventually succeeded in. And the second 40, starting from Rosh Chodesh Elul and culminating on the 10th day of Tishrei, was when he persuaded God to give him another chance and give him second tablets. So Yom Kippur, originally Yom Kippur, is when he got the Luchos Shnios. But if he would have not messed up on the Luchos Rishonos, you wouldn't need Luchos Shnios. Just think about that. There'd be no Yom Kippur. At least not in the Yom Kippur in the sense that we understand it. Okay? The 10th of Tishrei, etc., etc. So today is supposed to be a feast day. Right? If it were God's plan, it's the day he picked for a feast day. We screwed up during a fast day. So you see, there's something in the air of Shavuos of Tammuz. Sounds like a moral type thing, although I never see anybody say it. To me, it's Pashim Shah. When I say Pashim Shah, if you just think about it for a second, you kind of see it, because I didn't make any of this up, as you know, right? So consider well. They made, let's just figure this out. They made the day, which is supposed to be Matan Torah, in the day of Shaviras Haluchos Shaviras HaTorah. So notice it's a bad luck day because of our perverseness. Bad luck day for the Torah. Oh, that's very good. Sarv Aposmus is the Torah. That's the day this guy Aposmus destroyed the Torah. What did this guy do? It's a hot Torah. What do you mean he destroyed hot Torah? So some say it means like this. Some say it means the master copy of Moses. Right? I read this in Shul the other day. How do we understand that? Good. Before Moshe died, God told him, write a bunch of Sefer Torahs and give one to each tribe. Huh? Give one to each tribe. So Reuben will have a copy. Written by Moshe Rabbeinu himself. Okay? And Shimon will have a copy, and Yisachar is one done of Torah, etc. But then make one extra copy as a master copy to prevent anybody from cheating. Otherwise, what will the Reuben Sefer Torah say like this? Reuben gets 3 times as much land as anybody else. What will Yisachar say? Yisachar gets 5 times as much as anybody else. That's just the way it goes. In order to be sure, right? That it isn't it. By the way, Ephraim and Menashe did get it. So in order to be sure you have the right nusach, there's a master copy to keep everybody honest. And that master copy, which is written by Moshe himself, was originally kept in the Aron Kodesh, in the Beis HaMikdash, and so on and so forth. They say this is the one that was found in the time of Yoshiyahu when they did the excavations, because they had to hide it from wicked Jewish kings. I repeat, wicked Jewish kings, like Menashe and Ammon and these other guys, Achaz, who wanted to destroy the original copy of Moshe Rabbeinu's Torah. First of all, because they wanted to destroy every single Sefer Torah they could have. And I'll bet you, this is just my own hunch, knowing who Menashe was and these other guys, Yoyakim, they probably want to get rid of the master copy, and then they could issue their own version of the Torah, and their version of the Torah, Sefer Torah, would say like this: bow down to the idols, kill your brother. You put whatever you want. He said, oh, this is Moshe Rabbeinu. You don't have a master copy to prove it wrong. Now, what happened to this master copy? I don't know, right? There are sources that say, I know you know this, that they're buried underneath the temple. Rambam and others talk about that, right? I'm talking about not simply the Aron, which had the Ten Commandments in it, but I'm talking about Moshe Rabbeinu's individual copy that he wrote as an extra copy. Imagine what that would go for today, right? Where's the fancy auction? Moshe Rabbeinu's Torah. Now, what happened to this? So we don't have it today. So one way of looking at it is it's also buried underneath the ground somewhere over there. Okay. Another one is that it's not. So if it's not, what happened? So the Greeks burned it. In which case, if this is true, nobody even thinks about it when we get to Hanukkah time. One of the catastrophes, I would even say like this, is a bigger catastrophe than destruction of than the rape of the temple that the Greeks perpetrated. If they burned Moshe Rabbeinu's 13 copy of the Torah, that's a big catastrophe. And if we didn't, Shavasar Tammuz, what a bummer. We can already see mystically that Shavasar Tammuz, the day the tablets were destroyed, the Luchos Rishonos says Mesugel, let's put it this way, for other things that Moshe had to be destroyed. So let's put it this way. It ain't a great idea to schedule Achnasa Sefer Torah for Shavasar Tammuz. That's what it sounds like, right? Now, as I said before, how this would fit with the others is not so clear. Hamid Salam Behechel, it's along those lines. You see, it's a day of profaning. But as you know, there's also the two big tragedies that probably what most people recall when it comes to Shavasar Tammuz. That's the breaching of the city, round one, and breaching the city, round two. The time of Nebuchadnezzar with the first temple, and then what's his name, Titus, with the second temple. Okay, but the two cases are not identical. The two cases are not identical. First of all, one is supposed to have happened on the 9th, the other on the 17th. Here's the Yerushalmi. It's a little unusual in the fourth parak. And when it says Hufko Ir, Amar Tankum Kilko Cheshmonis Yishkan, they got the date wrong. So according to this, when it writes in the book, right, that the city was breached in the first temple on the 9th of Tammuz, that's just the wrong, what's the right word, a wrong date. That's very interesting. So what you're telling me is, and these are Marayim, what you're telling me is, not everything in the Tanakh is literally true. It could be that some dates are wrong, for whatever reason. It could be other things are wrong. I mean, you're opening yourself up to an attack on Bible inerrancy, because usually say it's there, it's right. You see, whether they're correct or not, there were Tanoim, Amoraim who were prepared to say, for whatever reason, the date here is wrong or not. Of course, the counter argument is, but they preserved the fact that it's a toast. So the Gemara says, right? That they got the dates wrong, and it goes in the bottom with another pasuk with Cheskel, and it's just interesting to hear your Rabbi Yochanan B'Shlokish. Each one of them is trying to explain through the form of a mashal why they got the dates wrong and why they preserved the wrong date. Because you're saying really it's not the 9th of Tammuz, really it's the Shavasar Tammuz, but we're writing the 9th anyway. And one goes like this: Rabbi Yochanan Amar Lamelch Shayoshe B'Chashiv Cheshbonis. It's like a king who was writing out his accounts, his money stuff. Bo Amar Lo Nishba Bincha. On Sunday brought him terrible news. Nishba Bincha, your son was captured. But his Kal Cheshbonis, Mirod Sarah. He was so what's the right word? Upset by this. Physically, mentally upset. He couldn't hold cup, and he started making mistakes in his calculations. So here's a guy working up the income figures, the outlay figures, his expenses like a good businessman, and then he said, "Oh, now came just a terrible tragedy. Guy can't think, right?" And he writes wrong figures. And he said, "Amar Yasezer Rosh Lecheshmonos." Right? And in later years, he looks back and he said, "Oh, I remember this is the day they told me my son was captured. That was such a terrible thing. As a commemoration of that terrible tragedy, just keep the wrong figures there. Just keep the wrong figures there." And Rish Lakish does similar. Nishma bin Chaben is Kadesh. The son was killed. Okay? Kabul Hargo. And same idea. In other words, they're saying is basically is a mental breakdown, nervous breakdown. You couldn't hold cup to keep the dates right. And they decided when they wrote the book, even though later on they realized the date is wrong, to keep the date in there, so you'll know how bad we felt when we heard the news of Beis Hamikdash was destroyed or the city was breached or whatever it is. It's like a permanent marker. That's an interesting way of approaching it. The other way, of course, is to say that what do you call it? There really was a ninth, except for now in the halachic literature. It's kind of funny. Just pull it out for the heck of it, the Kavachaim, because he always has all these different funny sources in a very good way. I like him. And he says, by the way, this is just interesting. He has a quote from the Shlaw. B'yom ha'tainis yesh matzah mikas. You better not get angry today. And you Jews, you have to be honest. Be yoser. In other words, not honest the way you are in business every day here, but really honest. When the tainis is over, you can go back to the regular. But that's not what I was talking about. It's according we have a pietistic tradition, many of them in Judaism, as you know. After all, we recently had the Sphira, and the whole idea of practicing the Sphira restrictions is a pietism. It got adopted into mainstream Jewish practice, but it's from our very pious ancestors of old. As you know, it's not in the Gemara at all. So when we have recorded that Bais Rishon is the 9th, Bais Shem is the 17th, there were Balei Nefesh pietists, real firmies. Could be your great-great-great-great-grandparents. And they said, I'm going to fast twice, one for Bais Rishon, one by Shem. Isn't it interesting? So it says, Baal Nefesh Yisana Gamba Batisha. Baal Nefesh Yisana. So there's such a tradition. Okay? Others dispute this tradition for technical reasons, but I'm just telling you, it's interesting. Now, there's an important difference between Bais Rishon and Bais Sheni. And again, I'll just do this by heart. I don't want to drive Chaim here too crazy. He's stuck here listening to me here. Now, if you take the trouble, look inside, you'll see in the Tanakh, what happened in the first temple was as follows. The Babylonian army was besieging Jerusalem. They literally waited till the food ran out. In the book of Eicha, of course, it describes the horrors of the famine. Tovim hayu chalecher mechal mechama. Those who died from the sword had a quicker death than those who died mechali rov, from the famine that they wasted away. It's a terrible thing. We know this from the Holocaust, at least in my family we do. My father went through this junk. And eventually, by Shivasa Tammuz, or the 9th of Tammuz, the strength ran out. I mean, the Jews on the inside really ran out of steam. And they physically couldn't fight against the enemy. And the enemy was therefore able to breach the city, breach a wall in the city, and the Jews surrendered. So in other words, when Shivasa Tammuz, the king and some soldiers ran away. I remember, you look inside for the exact details. But the city was captured, and the fighting was over on Shivasa Tammuz, or 9th of Tammuz. Let's go with Shivasa Tammuz for the heck of it. Right on the 9th of Tammuz. I'm sorry, Shivasa Tammuz. So they surrendered to the Babylonians. Like I said, the king ran away and was caught and tortured to death, and the others, and the so and so, and such and such. What happened at that point? Who were the people there? Nebuchadnezzar was not there. If you read inside, you'll see Nebuchadnezzar didn't even bother to show up during the siege. Like beneath his business. He had professional generals there. He had Sherman and Grant and all that, and they took care of the siege. Then, that's Shivasa Tammuz. The city, when it was captured, was prostrate at the enemy's feet. So you had a starving population. It doesn't say whether the Babylonians fed them or not or anything. We will never know. Okay? We will never know. I would like to think that they gave them what to eat, but it's totally possible that they were starving. In which case, the 3 weeks that follows is mamash a time of terrible suffering we commemorate. Imagine the Jews in the First Temple period, with the city captured by the Babylonians, I'm not even talking about the Babylonians killed and raped and all that. But totally separate from that, right? They're starving. And the Babylonians not giving any food. Where did I read this? The other day I was reading a thing about Grant. When they captured Vicksburg in 4th of July, it's 1863, the soldiers were starving. I mean, mom was starving. And the Union troops came in. They gave them food. This was the enemy. They couldn't stand starving so much. But that was the Union Confederacy. I don't think it was the Babylonians. Anyway, when the city fell, meaning it surrendered, which was in Shavuot of Tammuz, so then they sent word to Syria, where King Nebuchadnezzar was located at that time, in Riblah. And they said, we captured the city. What do you want us to do with it? Now, they didn't have telegraph, they didn't have telephone, so it took a while for, let's say, a Pony Express rider to ride from Jerusalem to northern Syria. Just think about that, in terms of logistics. And then to go to the king and to get instructions, what should we do to the city? Should we kill everybody? Should we let him go? Should we burn the place down? Should we treat him nice? What are we supposed to do? What are we supposed to do? The king sent one of his generals, Nebuzaradan, who was not at the siege, down with instructions. Nebuzaradan, if I remember correctly, showed up on 7th of Av, something like that, and the orders were to burn the city down. So no, it was done in cold blood, so to speak. One during a fight, and that's when it says they burned every big house and the temple and all this kind of stuff, and they took the temple apart because Shlomo Melech had all this bronze and who knows what, and gold and silver, and that's what happened then. So in other words, the city was captured on the first day. There was a period of 3 weeks that it took the message to get up north to Nebuchadnezzar and then bring down the orders with a general named Nebuzaradan down. And then on the 8th or 9th of Av, they proceeded to execute those orders. And they, as you all know, they burned the city down. And they marched the survivors off to Babel. Obviously, that's July, August in the Middle East. Anybody that wasn't in great health died along the way, like a Bataan death march. No question about that. There must have been a ton of dead. Separate from that, there's a story in the Agadah, not in the Bible at all, that Nebuchadnezzar got obsessed over the bubbling blood, and the bubbling blood caused him to kill a whole bunch of people. So there was some sort of either a massacre that took place in that time, well after the city had surrendered, when all these people just helpless, or they died, as they say, on the Bataan death march, except the young, able to do so. Because you tell me, are your age, I don't know how old you are listening to me, are you able to walk in the Middle East? The desert probably didn't give you shoes to Baghdad, because that's where Babylonia was, south of Baghdad. Walk from Israel there? Tell me about that. You can really do that? So it must have been horrible. The horrors of the Bataan death march are not mentioned in the Tanakh. It's just very interesting. But instead, the civilian population surrendered on Shavuot of Tammuz. Now, Bayesheni was a completely different story. How do we stop this for a second? I'm going to get a book. Okay, gotta get used to this. Since this is also being done video-wise, so I'm going to show you something that's very important for anybody who wants to understand anything about Shavuot of Tammuz at the plain level. Look what I have in front of me. It's the Art School History of Second Temple Period, right? Many of you are familiar with this book. It's not the second one. Yeah, I'm going to put this was the first one, which was really an Israeli 8th grade book. They translated in English history book long ago. But this is a good map I'm about to show you. And if you see over here, okay, those of you in the video can see this map. Those of you not, if you get the Art Scroll Second Temple book, it's on page 190, 190. You can look at it yourself. And this is by Bayesheni, of course. And it's following Josephus, is what it is. Don't tell anybody. And if you look over there, now I'm going to try to point and make some sense out of this. It says the siege of Jerusalem by Titus started right after Pesach. So the Romans penetrate the new city, 7th of Iyar. It's number 1, which would be over here. What's wrong with me? I can't see the things well. But it would be over here, right? Okay, and then the 7th of Iyar, pretty soon after Pesach, the Romans established a new camp within the city. Then they breached the second wall on the 15th of Iyar. That's over here. They breached the second wall, the 15th of Iyar, and then they raised Antonia. They captured Antonia on the 5th of Tammuz. So, in other words, by the Roman siege, 12 days before Shabbos Tammuz, the Romans captured the fortress which was adjacent to the temple, named after Mark Antony, that Herod had built. Again, this was a fortress adjacent to the temple, where the Romans in the old days used to have soldiers there to control the temple activities, and for various reasons they lost it, and now they recaptured and destroyed it. And then it says Antonius raged, and then they penetrate the Temple Mount. That's over here. Okay, so they started here and they went this way. In which case, Shavuos Tammuz is a different character. Shavuos Tammuz means, as part of the general assault on the city, the Romans wanted to, for military purposes, wanted to capture what they regard as the vital center of the Jewish resistance. They identified that as the Temple Mount, not incorrectly. We all know that the Temple Mount is not identical with the temple. The Temple Mount, the Har Bayis, is where the Beis Hamikdash is located. So if you look over here, you can kind of see there's what I'm pointing to now is the Har Bayis with the Beis Hamikdash in it. They breached the Har HaBayis wall with the Kotel's part of that on Shavuos Tammuz, and then they continued to fight like the Alamo for the next 3 weeks. Okay, and on Tisha B'Av, on the 8th and 9th of Av, is when they broke into the building of the Beis Hamikdash itself proper on top of the Temple Mount, which is crazy. That means that they were fighting hand to hand in that small area of the Har Bayis from Shavuos Tammuz to Tisha B'Av, basically. That boggles the mind. And there's not a lot of water in this, that, and the other in the middle of the summer. Eventually, the Romans broke in. I'm not going to discuss that now. But that's a very different story than the Bayis Rishon. So it means that the 3 weeks that you and I are about to start was a period of continuous combat with the Romans, and starvation for the rest of the city. Because, Jesse, you should know this, when they, even after Tisha B'Av, here it is, even after Tisha B'Av, when they captured the Temple Mountain, the rest of the city, which wasn't captured by them yet, continued to resist. Isn't that interesting? So Tisha B'Av isn't really over, honestly, until like the 9th of Elul, if you want to get down to it. It's a sad story. It's like the Germans, they chased them in sewers and stuff like that. It's all in great detail in Josephus, if anybody's interested in reading it. This is the time you need to read it. If not, you're not reading Josephus in the 3 weeks. When are you reading it? I'm talking about his account of the Jewish war. So the very notion of Hufka Ir Rishon Rishani is true, but they're not the same story just repeated twice. The first time, it was the city surrendered totally. Then you had that 3 week of limbo till they decided to march everybody off to captivity and kill whoever they killed. Mashenki by the Romans, they were fighting on the Har HaBayis and in the rest of the city as well, the parts they hadn't conquered, all during the period we call the 3 weeks. So either way, you certainly see that the period we call Shavuos Tammuz had its own brand of tragedies. As I said, you can sort of see it should have been Shavuos. Obviously, it didn't turn out into that. You have 2 blows against the Torah, and then you have the blows against the Beis Hamikdash. The blows against, but of a different character. I think I overloaded you with a lot of facts, but at least somebody should have an idea of what Shavuos Tammuz is at the basic level. And with that, I'll let you go and what's the right word? Survive the rest of the fast day. And now Chaim will tell me whether we did this right technically or not. And with that, I bid you a good day and have an easy fast.